Shalom. First and foremost, want to give honor and praise unto Yah, the creator of heaven and earth. We're going to go over a couple of issues. One of them being, did the Israelites plagiarize from Egypt? And two, a little history concerning the Hyksos. Now, I just want to sit there and draw someone's attention to this picture that I have focused here. You'll notice this here is, they say, Tut upon his horse. This is from his funerary chamber. And dogs being sicked on the people of the Nubians. All right, so let that be known and understood. This is actually from Africa itself, or should I say more properly, Egypt itself. So Egyptians were not about Africans. Egyptians were about Egyptians. And some people say that was a civil war. If it was, then why would you memorialize it in such fashion? America had a civil war, but the South, which still holds a Confederate flag in Georgia, still showing you how their true feelings are. This here, brothers and sisters, as we are showing here, is not a civil war. This is the Egyptians painting a picture of them attacking the Nubians. All right, so I'm going to keep it on there for a little while. Now we're going to get over the fact of what they say, such as Israelites plagiarizing from Egypt. Let's go over the definition of plagiarize, then get into some history. Plagiarize, to take ideas, writings, etc. from another and pass them off as one's own. Now that is to say, to take somebody's idea, you don't give them the credit for the writing or the idea, then you pass that writing or idea as if you're the one who did it yourself. Now, in order for somebody to prove that somebody plagiarized something, you will have to sit there and show when they would have had access to even be able to get into the other's records or ideas to even plagiarize. So the point in me showing that aspect and mentioning that aspect is the fact, brothers and sisters, ancient Egyptians were very protective of their stuff. You understand? And so what they didn't want known, they would have not had known. And so when you read about the situation that happened in ancient Egypt when they took scribes' writings, like when you read in the situation with Apura and so forth and so on, that right there is pretty self-evident. Now, in ancient Egypt, they actually had certain fortresses. One of them that comes to mind is a fort called Fort Tajaru. In the Greek, they pronounce it as Zele or Zele, and it's by the Sinai. Then there was another fort, which in today's terms they call Tel Habua, and that was established by Seti I. So the fact that ancient Egyptians had different forts set up shows you good and well that they was not about having anybody just going up into their land and getting things out. I also would like to show a picture concerning this here. And this is what they refer to as a picture concerning the walls of the prince in ancient Egypt. And what this is about concerning this matter, brothers and sisters, is the fact that Amenemhat the First, we're going to get into this a little bit later on, he constructed what is called the walls of the prince. And there were soldiers around it. So is it the same situation when you go into what happened with Thutmose the First in the Valley of the Kings? That was to be able to protect it against tomb raiders and so forth and so on. So my point in mentioning that and getting back into the issue of whether the Israelites plagiarized from Egypt is you will have to show when did the Israelites have access to get into Egypt to plagiarize. Now, let's look up the word exist. Exist means to have reality or being, to live. That is, one more time, exist, to have reality or being. Second definition, to live. Now, according to many who even state that the Israelites plagiarized from the Egyptians are also some of the same people who said that the Israelites never existed. So how can a non-existent people be charged with plagiarism? You can't plagiarize something if you never existed. So this is what happens when you have that hating spirit and that attitude of saying, well, we just don't like that people. So therefore you start hating in your spirit and that blocks your wisdom. So you start saying things that are actually unwise and unintelligent, such as, yeah, the children of Israel never existed. That stuff is made up. And then you turn right around and say the Israelites plagiarized. Plagiarism is a verb. Or should I say to plagiarize is a verb. So a verb is an action. So to exist is an action. So if the people never existed, they cannot do an act as plagiarism. That's just logic. Okay, now to get into a next subject concerning this matter, brothers and sisters, if we will. We can get into the Hyksos issue if we will. I would like to read a reference material in a reference book. And for the record, the only time people would have had access to get into Egyptian records that we even have now, the Yapur papyrus, the Anastasi papyrus, the Westcar papyrus, the Harris papyrus, the Brooklyn papyrus, the Rhine papyrus, whatever papyrus exists, the only reason why people today in 2015 have access to it is because the true Egyptians are not in their land to protect their own stuff. So let that be understood. Now I want to read this portion right here. It's called Ancient Egypt by Baines and Malek. All right. And in it, we read the following on page 41. It says, there were many immigrants from Palestine, apparently peaceful arrivals, who were absorbed into the lowest levels of Egyptian society, but at least one of whom, Kenjir, became king of Egypt. They probably came as a result of shifts of population in the Near East after 1800 BCE and were forerunners of the movement that was to bring foreign rule in the Second Intermediate Period. In the later 13th dynasty, the eastern delta was heavily settled by Asiatics, including areas that had been completely Egyptian in the 12th dynasty. Qantir, also called Katana, which became the Hyksos, later the Ramesses capital of Egypt. Now, I wanted to sit there and let that have been read because it just goes to show you that there were situations in which the people called the Asiatics, in today's terminology, the ancient Egyptians, as we went over in other videos, they refer to them as the Amu. Now, these Amu were not distinguished in their own nationality, be they Amalekite, be they Edomite, be they Kassite, Babylonian, Philistine, Hebrew, so forth and so on. They just simply refer to them as the Amu inside of the Egyptian language. So let that be understood. All right. Now, another issue to go over concerning this subject matter right here. I have a book written by Donald Radford. And in this book here, on page 100, we see something concerning the Hyksos that's very, very interesting. All right? And it reads as follows. The true identity of the Hyksos can now easily be ascertained through the examination of two bodies of evidence. One, archaeological, and two, linguistic. We shall have occasion below to look more closely at the archaeological record, but suffice it to say for the present that recent excavations at such Hyksos sites, such as Eastern Delta as Tel El Dab'a and Tel El Makhuta, have revealed an intrusive culture whose ceramic and artifactual content differs not at all from the culture of contemporary Middle Bronze Age Palestine and Phoenicia. The linguistic picture is wholly consistent. Contemporary Egyptian texts from the time of the Wars of Liberation and the early 18th dynasty called the invaders Emu, that is, speakers of a Western Shemitic tongue. Although the Hyksos have left behind no inscriptions to their native language, a number of their personal names have turned up on seals and dedicatory text, and these can be analyzed syntactically and lexically. It is abundantly clear from such an analysis that we are dealing with personal names from a West Semitic dialect. All but two names sustain a West Semitic derivation, and none of them permit a Hurrian. Now, what's basically being stated there, people thought at one time that the Hurrians were the people who were the Hyksos, but this author right here is basically stating in another part of the same book that the Hyksos were not from there. And so basically, the author is basically saying you can tell who the Hyksos were from linguistic reasons, also due to the fact of archaeological findings. And part, brothers and sisters, of those archaeological findings we see, as stated from before, is this right here. This right here is what they refer to as the Yaakov Baal Scarab. They say that Yaakov Baal or Jacob R said in Egyptian because there is no L. That's why you see what is referred to as the open mouth here representing the R. That represents the L in other languages, but it's R in Egyptian. And what that right there basically, brothers and sisters, is saying, according to the writing of Manetho, that Yaakov Baal was a ruler in the 16th dynasty of Egypt. Now, those who are familiar with the situation with the Hyksos, they know good and well that 15th and 16th dynasty was when the Hyksos was ruling in northern Egypt in what they refer to as the Delta. You see? So those kind of things need to be known and understood. Now, another thing I wanted to point out, brothers and sisters, is this part right here. This right here is reference to the people called Syrians, or in the Bible they refer to called the people of Aram. And this is found in the 15th century BCE in the land of Egypt. These people were part of the people that were referred to as the Amu. And that right there just goes to show you how the people who the Egyptians called the Amu looked like. That's very, very important to let that be understood. Now, moving along in the presentation, I have a book entitled An Introduction to Ancient Egypt. Now, in this book right here on page 53, we're going to read the following. And this right here gets to show you where the history ties into play at. In foreign affairs, Egypt was particularly active during the 12th dynasty, the pattern of activity being established by Amenemhet I. Pay attention to this part here. To keep out from the Delta, now you know the Delta is the northern part of Egypt. We went over this, and Torah is not for my art part 3 and 4 on YouTube. To keep out from the Delta the continuous ways of infiltrating Asiatics from the east, Amenemhet I constructed a fortification known as the Walls of the Prince. So to keep out from the Delta, the continuous wave of infiltrating Asiatics, the pharaoh who happened to be the first pharaoh of Dynasty 12, he being Amenemhet, or called by the Greeks Amenemhet I, he constructed what we see here. This here is called the Walls of the Prince. All right. And that was to keep out the Asiatics from the Egyptian Delta. Now, why were they going into the Delta? The same reason why people go into America today. That's why you find people from Hispanic countries coming to America, West Indian countries coming to America, people from other places of the world that come to America, because Egypt then, like America now, is like a powerhouse. So you go there, make your money, send your money back to your people, and so forth and so on. Many people from West Africa do that inside of the United States. So it's not too hard to figure out how powerful of a kingdom, believe it or not, Egypt was, for even to have those people wanting to go down there. But just like America, and note, brothers and sisters, the ancient Israelites referring to Mizraim. When you go to Deuteronomy 28, verse 68, it says that the Most High will send Israel back into Mizraim, or Egypt, in ships. So let's see a correlation why the Bible in the Israelite term will refer to this captivity here brought by ships and ancient Egypt as one and the same. You have it to where Mount Rushmore, where all of their artifacts, is virtually no different than when you go into the walls of Karnak and Medinet Habu. The pyramids on the dollar bill, brothers and sisters, is no different than the pyramid that you see at Giza. The eye on the $1 bill represents what they call the eye of Heru. Heru was an Egyptian god, which the Greeks called Horus. So you can see in even the economy and the mindset of the United States of America, how it is like unto Egypt. And just like that, just like the Egyptians have black people being sicked on by dogs, so did they do in Alabama in the 1960s to black people. And once again, brothers and sisters, getting into what we call the Walls of the Prince, do they not sit there inside the United States where people see America as a powerhouse, give who they refer to as immigrants, especially if you're black or Hispanic, a hard time to get citizenship? Well, they keep them from the Delta in ancient Egypt. So did they sit there and set up inside the United States borders so that way people just can't come over into this country? So this country, America, is the plagiarized version of ancient Egypt. It's not the Bible. It's not the children of Israel, because the Bible says treat the stranger as yourself. So therefore, America nor Egypt did that. So America, not ancient Israel, is the plagiarized version of Egypt. So with that, shalom. on part one.